host for this afternoon's Heritage Classic webinar. We're going to be introducing our panelists. So go ahead and raise your hand. Chad Fritchie, he is an employee wellbeing specialist for Mayo Clinic's Dan Abraham Healthy Living Center. He specializes in working with runners at all levels for training for a large range of distances. He also works closely with the older adult population and enjoys helping each of them improve their quality of life through improved wellness. And he is a certified health and wellness coach. He also auditioned for the role of Thor, but turned it down. That is our wonderful Chad Fritchie. Along with him, we have Ann Meyer. She's an employee wellbeing specialist for Mayo Clinic Employee Wellbeing. Although she serves all of Mayo Clinic, she calls Southwest Wisconsin her home. She's a national board certified health and wellness coach and was the runner-up for Miss Teen USA. So Ann, thank you for being here. Next, we have Dr. Scott Hawk. He's a physical therapist and strength and conditioning specialist at Mayo Clinic, Florida. Dr. Hawk is an instructor in physical medicine and rehabilitation with Mayo Clinic College of Medicine. He is a faculty member in the Sports Medicine Fellowship Program and has special interest in ballistic sports, football, weightlifting, rugby, and running. And he just got back from the Olympics. No, he didn't. I'm kidding. But we would like to have had him there. And last but not least, we have Dr. Sunny Ann Alessandria. She has her doctorate in physical therapy and has been practicing at Mayo for over 28 years. She graduated from University of Florida and also has her Pilates certification. She specializes in general wellness and core strengthening, which is an important for all aspects of fitness. And Sunny, she is our celebrity for the day. She has her own cooking show, and so we're very excited to have her. She was on the Food Network. Everything that I've said, we're playing a game, 2 truths and a lie. So I guess you guys can guess what are the lies with our panelists. But we're gonna get started, and we have a couple of different questions that have been asked ahead of time. If you have questions that you wanna add into our question list, please feel free to add them in the Q&A and we'll get to them if we're able to. And so to start out with our panelists, what is a good activity to do cross-training? Chad, awesome. Let's hear it.
So cross-training, a few things that I typically would recommend on cross-training days would be a bike, anywhere from a outdoor bike during the summer months. Also a recumbent bike or a stationary bike. So any kind of a bike would be a great cross-training opportunity. Also, the pool is another good opportunity, whether you like to swim or even just water walk, water run. Any of that's can be good. And then the last thing I typically recommend a lot of times is also rowing. So using a rower, if you have a fitness facility available to you, using one of the rowers can be a great non-weight bearing exercise for cross-training days.
Fantastic. And I think, Scott, you have something to add?
All right. So I'm going to expose my bias on cross-training days to include more core and strength training. So for my running athletes, again, they have to spend the time doing something else than just cardiovascular fitness. So doing core strengthening, upper and lower body strengthening, again, depending on the level of athletes, but trying to move that into your rest day from running should be something helping you to get faster, to perform better and recover better from that as well. But I also agree with Chad about the other forms of cardiovascular fitness. But taking that time that where you shouldn't be running maybe to recover actively and get stronger. So again, that's my strengthening bias. You'll see it all day.
And I would say also on the core strengthening, that would be a great time to try some Pilates, to do some Pilates for the core, the hips, the abs, the scapular muscles, any of that. Core is basically your whole torso. So anything that you can do for that, that's often an area neglected by a lot of people, and it's crucial, especially the hips are very crucial with running.
And they're neglected to the point that they have to come see us as physical therapists. And the first thing that we work on is strengthening their hips and core muscles and having them do things that runners don't like to do because they need to be able to continue running.
And I have one more thing. We're working on even balance and intrinsics, like standing on one leg, for instance, is a great balance exercise to work on not only your outer hips, but work on your foot intrinsic muscles, which can help with numerous things. So balance would be another great thing to throw in on those days.
Fantastic. And Anne, do you have something to add? I see your hand up.
Yes, this has come up. The one thing I neglected to mention in the description of my background is that I'm also leading the Heritage Huddle group. And this question has come up several times with people who comment that their cross training makes them more sore because it's even something different compared to what they normally do. And they don't want to be adding more burden to themselves by doing something, especially if they're brand new to physical activity. They want to kind of take it easier on their cross training days. So let's also not forget even just some gentle yoga or stretching, just because part of the thing is we want to keep, especially those people who are new to this whole activity thing, keep moving, but not necessarily, stretching your limits or overburdening yourself any more than you need to. So including the gentle activity as well is pretty useful.
Love it. In regards to cross training, someone made a comment. So I see cross training is on day 7, but I don't see what that means. Is anyone able to elaborate on that?
I can go ahead and hear Nicole, and I don't know exactly, I don't have a training plan directly in front of me. So what I typically would recommend to most runners, and again, especially a lot of your newer ones, I think to Anne's point is everybody's going to be a little bit different. Typically running about 3 days a week. For some, it's only 2 days a week, depending on where you're at with your running, but about 3 days a week. And I think to Scott's point is a lot of people like to do cardio most days. And so that's where I'll recommend either the swimming, the bike, and or the rowing on 1 or 2 more additional days. It could be just 1 more and then throw in a yoga or a Pilates. And then the strength training, I kind of, instead of considering that cross training, I put that into a separate category as another additional 2 to 3 days a week. So I like to call my philosophy kind of the simple philosophy of 3-2-2. 3 days of running, 2 days of cross training, 2 days of strength training. Again, it can be more than that, especially if you're just doing like upper day 1 day, lower day another day, and you want to do those each twice. But if you're doing total body for more of a beginner, I would recommend 2 days a week for that strength training. Again, but it can vary person to person depending on their goals too.
And Cindy asks if I hear correctly, don't run every day.
No, because otherwise you're going to be seeing Sunny and Scott probably very regularly. So I typically recommend in all the stuff that I've researched and read, 3 days a week. If you're doing 3 days a week, anything more than that, that's why I like to get into more of the more of the rowing, the biking, so that you can at least keep your endurance up, but yet you're not putting all that stress on those joints too much. And then that strength training is going to be a huge component too, to keeping you healthy.
Speaking of putting stress, go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. So there are these people that are called runners that can run every day. So there are people that are physiologically adapted or blessed in a way that they can run every day and recover from every day. But that's a very small subset of people, probably not the people we're talking to today. So when the person asks a question about, so I shouldn't run every day, some people can. Now they still need to put the strength training into their routine and do some different things. And when they come on injury, they're going to realize that they need to maybe back that off. I personally run 3 days a week and I strength train 4 days a week. And then sometimes I double up on both. So, but generally I do for distance running 3 days a week. I do sprint intervals, different days, different types of things, but always strength training. So again, there are people that can do it, and then over time, over their running career, they may find that they need to put in more of those cross training days, more of the strength training aspect, because they start breaking down somewhere because they have a weak link. Usually, like Sonny says, usually their hips or core muscles that lead them to a knee injury that then sidelines them, and then they have to start doing these things. So this is probably more for the novice to intermediate walker runner. So I would say, yeah, 3 days a week is probably good.
And in regards to injury, that brings us into our next question in the scope of shin splints. So what are shin splints? And they're my nemesis. So what can I do to help myself so that I don't have them anymore? Yeah, Scott.
I can go if you like. Well, shin splints are basically where your shin muscles are trying to pull off the bone. So it's a periosteitis. So it's basically the muscles are trying to pull off the bone where they attach muscle to bone. They can either be in the anterior part of your shin, anterolateral, or they can be posterior medial. So there's and those two are different shin splints. So kind of knowing which side of the shin makes a difference, but it's often related to a significant increase in use, or the surface that they're running on, or if their shoes are they're not the correct shoes for what their activity they're doing. But by and far, it's a significant increase in activity. So to Chad's point, if you're starting a running program, running every other day is probably a good thing. If you go out and okay, I haven't ran and I'm going to run every day, you are likely to have shin splints. And then it's harder to treat than it is to prevent. So once you've got shin splints, they are somewhat self-limiting. You have to moderate activity to a certain point. You have to do more of that cross training, what Chad was talking about. And then we have to look at where you're weak, because a lot of times there's like glute and hamstring core weakness that influences your ability to push off, so that you use your glutes to propel yourself and your hamstrings instead of just using your anterior tib to decelerate your foot. That also could go into your running style. So if you land heel strike, foot out in front, and you're using those shin muscles to lower your foot every time you stride, you're more likely to get those anterior shin splints. So sometimes we change the landing pattern by changing their cadence with running. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. It's a whole lot easier to prevent them though, and being logical about how you start a program. I could go on, but I'm not going to.
And I was going to say also, we see it a lot. Sometimes people start running hills or bridges and their foot's slapping down frequently. They're like, I'm going to start climbing the bridges now. And they're running and their foot's starting to slap. So oftentimes we just, we'll work on, again, like Scott said, the running pattern, the good shoe wear, maybe strengthening some of the other muscles too. Okay.
And there's other treatments too, but I think that's probably beyond our scope of today. So go ahead.
Chad, let's hear from you.
So agree with everything obviously Scott and Sunny have to say. Just kind of to piggyback up, and more so in regards to if you start developing shin splints, a lot of runners that I've worked with, including I've been very lucky, and possibly because I've trained correctly, but I've never really had shin splints much. But what I have found for runners who had them that I found helpful is foam rolling out. If you have a foam rolling stick, using that right there, you'll certainly find where it hurts quickly. If you can wait as you start to apply some pressure to that. But I also want to go back to a question that popped up here in the questions area, kind of piggybacking off Scott as well. It says, is it important to have running shoes or walking tennis shoes just fine? So what I would typically recommend is to hit up a local running store. If you reside in Rochester, for example, we have a place called Terra Local where you can get a free running assessment. They'll get you on a treadmill, and I'm sure down in Jacksonville they have stuff like this as well, where it's typically free. They're going to be able to look and see exactly how are you striking, and what's going to be the right kind of shoe for you. And they'll typically give you, 4, 5, 6 different types of shoes with all the different brands that really match up your foot. That's not something you want to mess with in having the wrong kind of shoes when it comes to running, because that in itself can lead to obviously the shin splints or other injuries down the road.
And speaking of injuries, a question popped up. What kinds of stretches or strength training exercises can be done to help strengthen muscles to ease knee pain?
Yeah, so most people that come, and I would say, probably 90% of people that come with patellofemoral pain or anterior knee pain, they have significant weakness in their hips. So particularly hip abductors, sometimes external rotators. It's the muscles that help control your knee position from your knee from turning in or going to what we call valgus. It's hard for me to demonstrate on this, but basically, it's a lot more proximal strengthening that we advise. If you're having anterior knee pain, we're probably going to start with doing a lot more hip abductor strengthening with like mini bands around the knees, things like clamshells. If you're on your side, doing clamshells with a band around your knees, crab walking and monster walking, side walking with the band around the ankles. Now, there's very specific things. You can go through the motion of those exercises, but not get the neuromuscular control of your brain telling those muscles to work. So you can go through the motions and not really use those muscles. So that's why it's hard to teach exercise, with a handout or even on video. But generally, it's a lot more mechanics training so that they're actually to help improve their knee mechanics. But you've got to start with usually getting enough strength through the hip and core muscles, and then the neuromuscular control, getting their brain to get the muscles to start to work so that they can squat right, land right, do stuff on one leg. But it generally, it starts more proximal strengthening.
And yeah, somebody asked a question about would Pilates help with hip strengthening? Pilates does do a lot of really good hip strengthening, especially if you are doing a lot of side lying stuff. They do a lot with that, hips and the glutes. They will work on that and the core. Again, shoes are very important with the knee as well too, because if somebody's in the wrong pair of shoes, it's going to affect the way their feet turn in, turn out, and the different support. Somebody that pronates a lot and is hypermobile, you might need a shoe with a little bit more firmness, whereas someone that's got a real high arch might need extra cushioning and shock absorption. So we have a company here, First Place Sports is a good running shoe, and we actually get a discount too with Mayo. So there, you guys were talking about one where you are, but we really like First Place Sports for running assessments. But there's some other companies too around town. But yes, Pilates would work great.
And that's in Florida, right?
Correct.
Jacksonville.
Wonderful. And how often should you get your running or walking assessment done?
I guess it depends if you're having problems. I would say, what you think is happening is often not happening. If you think that you land on your midfoot, you probably land on your heel. So that if you're having issues, again, you're probably only going to do it if you're competitive to where you want to just improve performance, or you're having pain and issues. So I think, most often it happens when something's going wrong. You're coming out of an injury, and we do a running assessment. So if I have somebody who's running and they come in with patellofemoral pain, I'm going to have them do a lot of the strengthening things, progressing from doing band work to doing more closed chain things to help improve their knee mechanics when they're doing the one-legged squat and landing, and then get them on the treadmill and do a slow motion video analysis of how they're landing and their metrics like cadence and vertical displacement and some of the things that we look at with the running evaluation, and help them try to smooth out the ground contact forces, how hard they're hitting, what their mechanics look like. So I don't think it's something you have to do often if things are going well. I think it's more if things just aren't feeling right, or they're starting to have multiple injuries, kind of nagging things, there's probably something that needs to be looked at. And it's probably going to also result in getting some more specific strengthening in addition to some modifications of your running form.
And also on that note, I would say too, if anybody's had a major weight loss or weight gain, that may affect a lot too. That can affect shoes and orthotics, different things. Pregnancy can actually affect it due to ligament laxity too. So those are all big lifestyle changes that may warrant another running assessment.
We talked a lot about the activity piece of it. Now let's talk about my favorite part, the rest days. Is it okay to walk on rest days? And then part 2 of this question, can I run every day if I don't have muscle soreness, or do I really need to let my muscles recover and rest every other day? Chad, let's hear what you have to say, Chad.
So first thing in regards to the, can I walk on rest days? Absolutely. You can definitely walk. You know, I don't know if you necessarily would want to make it, and it really depends on where you're at with your fitness level too. You know, if you're someone who's newer to fitness, hasn't been doing a lot lately, you know, walking probably just around your neighborhood. If it's more on the flat side, you're probably just fine. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend anything intense, walking big hills, hiking, that kind of thing. Try to keep it more to rest and light and just regular walking. And then your second question there, Nicole, remind me again. Oh, well, I think we already already touched on that. Can I run every day, even if I'm not experiencing any soreness? And again, like Scott said, there is that very, very rare population that can. I'm not sure if we're talking to anybody in that crowd right now, but the one thing that a lot of runners, and even possibly part of that population, that I worry about is where do you want to be with your health? What do you want your quality of life to be like when you're 50, 60, 70? Do you want what you did today, running 5, 6, 7 days a week? Do you want that to affect your quality of life when you're 60, 70, 80 years old? Not because your hips are so shot and you're in a wheelchair. And so be careful with what you do today, even if you do feel great and there's no soreness, and try to stick to more of that 3 days a week, give or take a little bit on either end.
Scott.
Yeah. Yes. So as far as what Chad, I agree with Chad. The people that can run, the people that don't have arthritis in their family gene pool, don't have knee pain. Some people can run for 50 years, and I've seen them, and their knee X-rays look pristine. They're beautiful. So it really is an individual question. Some people can run every day and not have any joint pain. And then the rest of us will fall out at some point. You'll try to go 4 days in a row or something, and then there'll be a threshold where you'll start getting a tendonitis somewhere. You'll start getting knee pain. Again, and we know from the research that running does not cause knee arthritis. They've done studies in runners that have run for long periods of time, and they actually have less arthritis than the people in the control group. And the reason that is because they can run every day and they can run for 50 years is because they don't have arthritis. They don't have the genetic predisposition to that. They haven't had the post-traumatic ACL injury when they were 20 years old, that now they can't run in their 50. Again, it's an individual question in that way. I think, you know, the group we're talking to, probably 3 days a week is probably reasonable. Someone asked about how long those shorter runs could be in the chat. You know, and again, that depends on your fitness level. Like Chad said earlier, you know, my short runs are 3 miles, and that's 2 days a week and a longer run on the weekends. And you should vary your intensity. If you're running 3 days every day, 3 miles every day, you may want to implement some of the other strategies and maybe have a longer run on the weekend, depending on what your goal is for that. If your goal is to run a 15K, then you need to have you need to have a long run with your short runs. Again, may not be applicable to this group. I'll stop now.
Chad, it looks like you have something to add as well.
Yeah, I think again, a lot of it's just piggybacking up on what Scott was saying, and it really is an individual approach person by person. You know, in regards to how many days a week you can run and the distances. I mean, if you're training for a 5K, you know, running similar distances each day it's probably not going to vary a lot from day to day. But if you're training for something of even as you get to a 5 mile or a 10K, a half marathon, you're starting to typically get into more not just running, but you're having your long runs that are more of an easier pace. And then you're having, you know, maybe you're throwing in an interval run or a tempo run where you're going a lot harder, but it's for more for time, shorter distances. So it's going to vary as you start to increase your miles. But again, if you're just focusing on a 5K training, probably more in that 2, 3, 3.5 mile range each day. But I also don't recommend running the same distances at the same paces every day. So change it up, get different speeds and also different distances. And if you know that your 5K is going to have hills, or you train with hills in mind as well.
Where were you all in gym class in 7th grade when I had to answer all these type of running questions? I could have used you in my back pocket. Are there resources to assess and improve running form? And if so, what do you recommend?
Well, there are a lot of things out there, and that's why it's hard. The good form running, chi running, a lot of them are trying to look at like a midfoot landing or lowering ground contact forces. But there's not one running style for every person. And you may be a heel striker, and that may be just fine. There are very competitive runners that land on their heel. So there's not a, you know, just like there's many golf swings, there's many different types of running. It's usually when something goes wrong, where they're having impact injury, you're having IT band syndrome, you're having knee pain, you're having heel pain, that we have to look and change things. So there are a lot of resources, but really, I'd say the best way is to video yourself running or have someone look at that, because you may think you're running a certain way and you look at all these resources, and okay, that's what I think I'm doing. And in fact, when someone videos you and you slow it down, you realize, actually, I hit really hard with my heel way out in front of my center of gravity, and I'm just pounding, and I'm going up and down, 12 centimeters every step. Those are things that you won't necessarily be aware of. I mean, it's good to have the information, but then you still may take another eye to tell you that, whether it's a shoe store that's going to do a running assessment, or like we do a private running assessment as a retail option here in Jacksonville. But there's or if you get injured, then we'll probably end up doing that too as a runner. So and there's one other question in the box I'm just going to go ahead and answer. Is walking up and down stairs good for your hips to strengthen on rest days? No. You can run a marathon and not strengthen your hips. You can walk up and down stairs and not get any stronger through your hips, still be weak. You have to do specific hip strengthening things to get your hips stronger. It's not just, walking or jogging. If running would do it, I wouldn't have all these marathon runners with weak hips. So just like, the stair activity is not a bad activity within moderation for exercise from a cardiovascular standpoint, but there's some mechanical things that you can do wrong with stair climbing. If your knee's turning in when you go up the stair, you may end up with more patellofemoral pain. So you have to make sure your hips are working well and your mechanics are good. So it's not a way of just, maybe I'll take the stairs and that'll strengthen my hips. No.
And Chad, what do you have to add?
I just wanted to add one more thing to that. So I always kind of joke with runners. I said, besides your shoes that you need for purchase, whether you have a gym membership or not, I mean, I strongly recommend strength training. But in addition to that, I say there's two things that I always recommend spending a little bit of money on. And one's pretty cheap, one's a little bit more expensive, but getting a foam roller of some kind, whether it's a foam roller, whether it's a stick, whether it's a therapy gun, getting some form of that and finding out what you like. And then also investing in some mini bands. I know Scott touched on that earlier, but doing lateral walks, monster walks, hip bridges. Those are all things that are going to definitely help to strengthen your hips, strengthen your glutes. Yep, Scott's got one right there. So a lot of different colors, usually typically yellow, green, blue, black. Probably somewhere in the yellow to green for most people is probably, I would think Scott would agree with that, yellow greenish. Some are on blue, not too many are on black, but that's what I would recommend. Not too expensive. You can usually get them on like performbetter.com has them, or sometimes even just your clinic stores will have them as well. So strongly recommend.
Oh, perfect. The question was, do you have any exercises to do with bands? Is there any way for others to get a hold of? Looks like there's this exercise sheet. Oh, Sunny, you're on mute.
So this is the company,
Perform Better.
Perform Better. So that's the company, and it comes with this. But oftentimes, if you order bands, it'll come with some handouts. But these are the kind of things we're talking about. Right here's the clamshell. And then walking sideways, but usually we do smaller steps than that. It's called the crab walk. If you Google crab walk, C-R-A-B, it's basically walking sideways with the bands. And then the clamshell is a good one. And we do sometimes here. The monster walk is front and back. We do the bridging with the band to engage the outer hips, to again, keep the knee in good alignment. And we sometimes we'll teach a mini squat with the band, to give some feedback to the hip abductors, the outer hip, when we're doing things. But these are just some great examples.
And someone asked
the
about
number.
the phone number on Perform Better, 1-800-556-7464.
This one you can.
We can have Sunny and Scott put that in the chat for you
In the
guys.
chat, I was just thinking that. Okay.
You can also just go to performbetter.com, and also it's I believe it's free. I could be quoted wrong on this, but Perform Better also does have a app on its phone. So if I could even, I don't know. So there is an app, and it's got all of its exercises right on there. It's got lots of, I don't know if I can even see. So Perform Better app, and that's got lots of exercises right on there. You can pull up. So if you don't have that little poster with you when you're at the gym and you have your bands, that's another thing you could also use as well.
Hey Maria, thanks for sharing that with everyone. She put up she found it on Amazon as well. So definitely for the folks on this webinar, please take a look at that further. Just for the sake of questions, we want to be able to answer your questions. One thing that was asked was, has there been any tips on what to use to track your time? Are there apps on your phone that help with this training plan? And what do you recommend?
Chad, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of apps out there. Whether you use Map My Run is a good one. If you, Apple Watch, there's, and those are the ones that I typically use. There's plenty of other running apps out there. It just depends on what exactly you're looking for. Map My Run, for example, will give you your whole breakdown of your cadence to your pace you're currently going at, which is kind of nice, especially if you start getting into things like tempo runs, kind of getting a ballpark idea if you're going too fast, too slow at that time. So, if you need to speed it up or slow it down a little bit. A lot of runners tend to get out and move way too fast in the beginning. So that helps to kind of really scale you back a little bit. And of course, they keep track of your distances. They keep track of your whole history of what you've done for runs of late too. So that's just one, Map My Run. But again, there's plenty of others. I'm sure Scott might have another one he wants to share.
Yeah, so I use the Nike Plus running app, have for years. It's fantastic. But if you're more serious about running and you're looking at those metric types of things like cadence and vertical displacement, those kind of things. Garmin has, again, more expensive, but there's a lot more products, and you can get a Garmin watch that's $300 plus a cadence sensor, and it can tell you how many steps per minute, which is your cadence. And typically, you know, as a running assessment, we're trying to get people close to 180. Really good runners tend to be 180 to 200 steps per minute. That decreases a lot of the up and down motion and some of the injuries that we see. So by and far, a lot of times we're having people that come in with impact injuries, increasing their cadence, increasing their steps per minute. And with the pod and the Garmin, you can actually see how many centimeters you go up and down every time you take a step. And you can real time try to correct that while you're running. So that the cadence and the vertical displacement, it also has ground contact time. So how long do you spend on the ground? So as you increase your cadence, you actually spend less time on the ground. So you're on and off your foot quicker, which allows you to have, again, less impact. So that it depends on how much you want to spend, how serious you want to get about data and metrics. But I like the running apps. Most of the time myself, I just run the Nike Plus running app to look at my distance, speed, cadence, and I have that linked to my Apple Watch.
And you talked about numbers, you talked about costs in regards to these apps. Of any of the apps that you had mentioned, are there free features or any of them free? Let's say I'm a brand new runner and I'm like, I don't want to spend $300 on a Garmin.
Yeah,
I'm trying to, yeah.
Most of the apps are free. Yeah, most of the running apps are free. You know, and now it's just when you start linking it to like other equipment, like Garmin has their own watches, and they have a lot more data-driven types of feedback, and they have little pods that you put on your waistband or your shoe, which tell you some of those things about the going up and down, how hard you're hitting, how long you're landing. So that's a little bit more advanced, but most of the apps are free. And it's a great way to track how much you're doing, again, so that you can keep on a schedule and know how you're doing with, you know, it's a little bit more retrospective with the Nike Plus app. So you'll know your cadence average for the run, but you may not know it at the moment in time while you're running. That's the difference. So if you get to the Garmin stuff, you'll actually know real time how quick your cadence is, so you can speed up during a run. So.
And in regards to tracking, to gathering metrics, someone had mentioned, I'm having issues regulating my breathing while especially my heart rate stays in a higher range. Everything I try feels shallow, like I'm going to hyperventilate. What do I do differently, or what can I do to regulate that breathing?
Okay, I guess I'll go. Cycling your breathing in through your nose and out through pursed lips would be the first thing. So breathing in through your nose and then slowing the air down as with your pursed lips to slow the air coming out and not exhale everything at once. And again, some people have a better time of breathing through your nose than others. But trying to cycle that and try to work on controlling your respiration rate while you're working at a moderate level of intensity. Once you start working at a higher level of intensity, you get to the point where you're short of breath, it's harder to recover. So it's something you have to practice at a moderate level of activity, trying to control your breathing. And again, it will depend on the heat. It'll depend on your pace. So, you know, again, in the hot weather here in Florida, that's going to happen a lot faster at a slower pace. But I think, you know, and there's also diaphragmatic breathing. If you look up things on diaphragmatic breathing, your diaphragm is a muscle below your rib cage that helps basically take air into your lungs. So sometimes people will tend to neck breathe and use their neck muscles. Diaphragmatic breathing is a more efficient way of breathing. So that's something you could probably Google and try to learn some exercises, try to help with diaphragmatic breathing.
So I pulled this up. I brought this. Can you all see that okay? It's on diaphragmatic breathing. So if you Google it, it explains it and it talks about how to properly breathe. And this is big in Pilates. We work on a lot of proper breathing. Yoga does too, working on the deep controlled breathing. So sometimes that can help too, working with Pilates and yoga. But I think, you know, warm up, cool down is obviously very important. And like Scott said, working at learning how to do this at an easier pace rather than getting the heart rate up so high and then trying to control it. Working at an easier level before you get up to where you're gasping for air.
Yeah, and the other thing is your running posture. So a lot of people, as they get tired, they start folding forward, rounding their shoulders, and flexing at their hips. So in that position, you cannot breathe well. So being able to stand tall, keep your chest out a little bit more, and not flex forward at the waist, because those things, as you get tired and fatigued from running, it will also affect your ability to expand your rib cage and take air. So,
Yeah.
Chad, anything else that you'd like?
I would just, yeah, I would completely agree. I feel like where most runners tend to have their issues with breathing is they're running up a hill and they're starting to hunch forward a lot, as that's getting very, very difficult. And so just, it takes a lot of practice. Like you said, it takes practice just to keep in mind, you know, am I staying more with good posture and staying upright? Because as soon as you start to hunch forward, that's when it becomes an issue.
If someone is training, whether you're running or walking, is there a specific time of day that's better than others?
When you can be consistent, like when you will do it, is the answer.
Yes, when you will do it.
When you will do it, when you will commit to it, when you will put it in your schedule and be consistent is my one answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree with that. It's when does it fit into your schedule? Some people are early morning runners because that's what works best or that's what feels best. Others are after work runners, lunchtime runners. It's really what fits best for you. The only thing I would maybe say on top of that is if you have flexibility and you could run it multiple different times throughout the day, is to really pay attention to how are you feeling in regards to your run, because some people will neglect sleep. They'll get up early and I find that, you know, they're only getting 5 hours of sleep, 6 hours of sleep, and they had the flexibility to run later in the day. And so I guess where I'm going with this is don't neglect sleep just to get a run in. Same thing if you find that you're running late at night and you're really having a difficulty falling asleep at night. As a result, you know, see if there are other opportunities in the day where you could try to run instead. Again, that can sometimes have an impact because poor sleep can lead to poor running eventually.
And some people will schedule their run around the elements. You know, we live in Florida, so I don't know, it's 90 degrees outside right now. It's fine, it's perfect. And I run at lunch, because that's the time that I have that's consistent that I can run, whether it's 100 degrees outside, but I only run 3 miles. I mean, it's not bad. But so whenever you can be consistent, but some people will get up early to avoid the heat of the day, which is fine. If you're doing a long run on a weekday, they may have to get up early. But those people are usually also going to bed early, you know, to make sure they do get to sleep so that they can recover well, like Chad said, and be a happier person.
Yeah, I'll add some humor into this with Scott here. So I was just down in Orlando here 2.5 weeks ago, down at Disney World, and I learned the hard way that I was on vacation, wanted to sleep in a little bit, got up and ran at 9 a.m. And I was not ready for that heat. So typically, you know, 9 a.m. in Minnesota, you're probably fine. 9 a.m. in Florida, if you're not used to that, I probably should have been up at 5 or 6 in the morning instead. So yeah, it's a lot about what are you used to and finding that right time for you. Nutrition is also another big piece to it as well, but we'll save that for later if that comes up.
There was a question in the chat. Any tips to share in regards to having side aches when running?
Yeah, and often with that stitch in your side that they're probably describing is your diaphragm. And basically, when your diaphragm is not well trained and you start to run harder than what you're used to, and everybody's had this as a kid, probably, like you run really, really hard and you're out of breath and you get your side hurts. So that improves with training. So trying to be able to train consistently so that you can control your breathing and use your diaphragm and gradually increase the intensity of your program, you can get away from that with training. And again, your posture does play a role. So if you're rounded over, then your diaphragm's not going to work efficiently, and it's going to get fatigued, and it kind of like cramps up a little bit, and you get what they call a stitch in your side. So with proper training, that becomes a non-issue.
I love all of this expert insight. One question that came up, how can I switch my training schedule from intermediate to beginner? I can actually answer this one in the system. You can email wellbeing@mayo.edu if you would like to switch the training plan that you're on. Because everything is anonymous with Slido, we're unable to reach out to figure out which one of you guys asked that question, but email us at wellbeing@mayo.edu if you want to switch your training plan. But now let's open it up to you folks. Any questions that you have right now in the moment, anything that you want a little bit more elaboration on, or questions you may have about nutrition or sleep, or anything that you think will help you on this journey as you participate in the Heritage Classic or other events for that matter. Man, tough crowd. One question, what do you get when you run in front of a car? Tired. The answer is tired.
Stole that from me, Nicole. So there are 2 questions that did pop up, Nicole, on the
Perfect.
Q&A.
All right, so the questions that we got, can you touch on the difference between walking cadence and form and running? Let's start with that one.
Yeah, so walking and running are very different things. The definition of running is reciprocal single leg stance, whereas walking, you actually have both feet on the ground at different points during the cadence, during your stride. So I don't have a lot of, there's a lot more data on running cadence in regards to running efficiency, injuries, those kind of things. And I think depending on your stride length with walking, your cadence is going to be different. But I don't think there's an optimal cadence for walking, and that is relative to speed a little bit more. Whereas running, there's a lot more variables that change your cadence with how long your foot's on the ground, how long you loft, how much you go up and down. There's a little less of that with walking. So I don't know that there's an ideal cadence with walking.
And then what helps you stay motivated? Yeah, Chad.
So motivation, I'm not sure if this is specifically for one of us or if this is just tips on how to stay motivated. So I'll kind of leave it at that, tips to stay motivated. I like to ask every runner, what is motivating you to want to run? Or what's motivating you to want to sign up for this 5K or this 10K? And so that's going to vary obviously from person to person. For myself personally, I run because I like to be a good example for my kids. I run because it's a great stress reliever. I feel so much better. So it really, again, it's going to vary from person to person, but I think it's important to really figure out what is it that has motivated you to start running in the first place. For some, it's a weight loss. So, and then, jot that down somewhere, because I had an individual here recently who is training for a half marathon, and she's been having a few struggles lately. And I had to ask her, what's keeping you from stopping? And she kind of had to stop and think about that. And I said, you mentioned to me at the very beginning, the reason why you started this whole half marathon training was because you wanted to honor your father, who had passed away last year. And that just quickly, she quickly snapped out of her thoughts of stopping and, not running anymore. And so again, we need those motivators, because you're gonna have moments along the way where you just don't want to train anymore, or you want to skip your run. And so if you can remember those reasons why you started in the first place, hopefully that helps you stay on track.
Yeah, if there's no questions, you know, for me, I was not designed to run distance. I run 4 half marathons a year, and I run about 15, 20 miles a week. I'm not a runner. I'm not those people that can run every day. I lift heavy things fast, you know, but I started running about 25 years ago. And for the first 6 years, I ran 3 days a week, and I felt good when I stopped. And that's why I kept doing it. And it's probably a selfish thing. People thought I was disciplined. I liked the way I felt when I stopped running. If you can do that often enough, eventually you will feel better while you're out there. But don't be disappointed if you feel like you're pulling a trailer when you start this program. If you're consistent over time, and literally I ran 3 days a week for 6 years, and that tells you a little bit about my personality. And now I love it. I mean, it is a time where I can think about other things and run and just enjoy being out in the 100-degree heat at noon. So if you can hold on, you know, just be consistent so you can get that feel of, hey, I feel accomplished, I feel better, I feel more energy, I can think better, I can focus my afternoon, those things, and just, you know, keep holding on to those. I'll feel better when I'm done with this long enough. It'll get better.
Yeah, I was also going to say, trying to get a friend or a family member to do things with you is great motivation. I mean, if you don't feel like doing it, but your spouse or your neighbor or your best friend encourages you and says, I'm ready to go, it's going to motivate you to go, or your children. You know, getting your children out there, and they can bicycle. They don't have to run if they're younger. You know, trying to get good quality family time is a great motivational thing too.
And I would add that if you, in addition to focusing on your why, frequently reflect on your successes. Always taking stock of, wow, this is so much better for me now. This is better than it was when I first started, and reminding yourself of those successes every day, and keeping the positive self-talk up, because that's going to have a strong impact too on just your willingness to tackle it again another day.
And Chad, would love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Last couple of thoughts here. I think, you know, depending on if you are struggling with your motivation, or you're the kind of person who likes to journal. One thing that I found really helpful is to jot down kind of how you're feeling pre-run, how you're going into it. If you want to write down what time of the day you're running at and where you're running at, how many miles you did, etc. You could certainly do all that, but then also to do that after the run. How did it go? What went well? What didn't go so well? So that you can really take a good look at, you know, boy, I felt really good out there today. It was a beautiful day. You know, I was really using a lot of positive self-talk, and everything just went smoothly. So you can take a hold of those things that went well, and hopefully carry those on to the next run and so forth. And then kind of just going off of Sunny's whole point of you know, grabbing a hold of support. If you don't have anybody that will run with you, support is still huge. Can you get someone, a family member, a friend, a colleague, someone that's also just aware of what your goal is? Hey, I signed up for this Heritage Classic. My plan is to run it. My goal is to finish the finish, you know, to get through the finish line. You know, just telling others that you're planning to do that, that's going to keep you more accountable, less likely to just hang it up if you start feeling like it's not working out for you. And then my last thing I wanted just to share with everyone is I know it hasn't been brought up yet today, is I always say, so that you don't have to go see Scott or Sunny at some point, is I always like to try to follow by what's called the 10% rule. Never increasing your mileage by more than 10% in a week, or never increasing your individual runs by more than 10% in a week. So if you did 3 miles today, and that's the longest you've ever ran, next week your long run is 3.3. I find a lot of people, as the weather gets nicer out, especially as we go from like in Minnesota from April to May or May to June, they'll get out and they'll do a 2 miler. That's the longest they do on a treadmill. And then they get outside and oh, it was a beautiful day and I did 5 miles. Eventually that's going to catch up to you, and that's going to lead to some of that hip pain, knee pain, side aches, whatever might have you, shin splints, you name it. Things are going to start popping up because you did too much too quickly and your body is not ready for that.
Well, there you have it. We got together some brilliant minds and experience right at your fingertips. And so thank you everyone for taking advantage and attending this webinar. Again, if you have questions, please email us at wellbeing@mayo.edu. We can't see your faces, but let's give a round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Take care, stay safe, and have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.